My name's Jim Hasler. I'm chair of the Finance Committee, among the hats that I wear. And you're probably thinking, great, the chair of the Finance Committee, he's probably going to talk about money. I am. He's probably going to tell us that it takes a lot of money to run a church. It does. He might even want me to give more this year. Yeah, that wouldn't be a bad idea. But he might also tell me that today's gospel was the perfect stewardship gospel, and it is, and it's perfect for what I really want to talk about, which is my own journey with money, and you might even consider it the pathology of money. And I thought really hard about making a banner that said money, 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 but I decided against that. When I was very little, and I'll put it at the point that I learned how to write, I would get, for Christmas and my birthday, a $5 bill from my Aunt Florence. And of course, my mother would make sure that I wrote thank you notes. Here's how this thank you note went. Dear Aunt Florence, thank you for the money. I will put it in the bank. I had a passbook savings account by the time I was in first grade, and that's exactly what I did. Not a penny towards ice cream, candy, or anything I wanted to get. Not all the way until I went to college was any money ever withdrawn from my passbook savings account, but several thousand. And I was always the person putting the money in, and I'm great at delayed gratification. And then I didn't think of it as a little bit of a pathology then, but then I went off to college and worked hard and got some job offers and accepted my first job. My mom wasn't happy that I was moving from New York to the West Coast. And she in particular didn't want me to mouth off at my new office so that I would get fired. And so my mother, always very good at weaning, said, well, don't think you can come home again. So all of that money going in, and now I've got a paycheck, and more money went in. And so I have always been a saver. And at a certain point, you're thinking, well, I'm saving for protection purposes, to protect myself from the world, from everything that could go wrong. And I was, and to an extent am, that person. Whenever I go on vacation with my sister-in-law, she looks for a cheap street or miser lane or something to line me up and take the picture next to. And it bears more truth than I want to admit. But when I was in a meeting, and I'm getting towards middle age, there were some big changes taking place at the company. We were planning reduction in forces, and a very sage general manager said, you gotta have eggs in all your baskets. You've gotta have some eggs in your money and job basket. You've got to have some eggs in your family and friends basket, and you've got to have some eggs in your community basket. Because if you don't have that, if one of those baskets upended and the others are empty, you are going to be very lost at sea. And so I took that actually to heart, because if I looked at my money basket, it was in pretty good shape. If I looked at my family and friends basket, it was in pretty good shape. But my community basket was empty. I was a transient in California. And part of most people know I volunteer for a lot of nonprofits, and I hold several positions in the church and do a lot on that. And part of that is because of wanting to make sure that I have roots and that I belong. And when I came to St. John's, which was a pure accident, my home church was Grace Cathedral, which I loved, and I knew almost no one at Grace Cathedral. And I was rushing and I was late, and where am I going to go to church? I opened up the yellow pages, and there was an ad for St. John's Episcopal Church, and off I went and became involved with this wonderful, wonderful community. And I started realizing that a big part of this whole desire of having a moat around you is really flawed. It's a flawed way of thinking about things. It is good to save, but it's also good to give, and it's also good to nurture the communities that we build and are in. And one thing I have always found about giving is the more I pledge and the more I give, the less I feel it. When the money comes out, I don't notice it anymore. It's gone, and I work around it, and it's gone to a really good purpose. And but you get older, and a lot of your thinking as you go through the stages of life evolves, and it changes from the 6-year-old putting the money in the bank to the 25-year-old, working their career and saving more money, to the 66-year-old who was reading Thich Nhat Hanh and read something about the importance of feeding. Like, what are we feeding our children? What are we feeding ourselves with our culture? And that really struck me, because as I look around at our culture, it's not the happy culture I grew up in. It's a much more flawed culture that invests in violence and disrespect and things I don't approve of. And so, in addition to wanting to be part of community, building community, making sure it's a thriving community, I want to make sure that we feed things that lead to joy, that lead to respect, that lead to us appreciating all of our own individual attributes and share love. And so from that standpoint, when I think about my pledge gift, I'm thinking about feeding my community as well as feeding me. And so I love today's gospel. I love that Scott had another reference to Thich Nhat Hanh, and I love that the prayer of St. Francis. So I hope you don't mind my money reflection. I did give thought to a banner, and my banner is, money grows the world we want.
Money grows the world we want. Amen. Amen. Thank you, Jim. Thank you.